Hello and welcome. In this video series, we're going to take a look at each class in Dark and Darker and go over the strengths, limitations, and a few general tips for how you might want to play them. So if you're thinking about which class you want to play in an upcoming playtest, this is going to be the video series for you. Starting off, in this episode, we're going to look at the Cleric. So Clerics are the primary healer of Dark and Darker and are often seen as playing a supporting role in many groups. But with the ability to equip some of the heaviest armor in the game, and sporting the highest base will of any class, Clerics are surprisingly resilient to all forms of damage, and they're more than capable of wading into the fight. Starting off with the Cleric's strengths. Healing. Obviously, Clerics are the only class currently that can heal other allies in combat. And in a game where combat is often decided by 1 or 2 hits, being able to undo all that damage in a quick spell can mean a Cleric can easily turn the tide of battle. Another strength that Clerics bring to the table is buffs. Spells like Protection and Divine Weapon are hugely impactful, and spells like Bless are a nice bonus when you're running low knowledge and you don't quite have the ability to run something like Sanctuary yet. Another strength of the Cleric is their general resilience. Clerics are rather tanky. Perks like Perseverance and Protection from Evil mean that dots aren't going to do a lot of damage to you and they're not going to last very long. And the armor and shield that you get to equip as a Cleric means you're pretty resilient to physical damage. And as we've talked about, having a huge will score means Clerics are naturally resilient to magic as well. So in terms of surviving in the dungeon, Clerics are pretty strong. Another strength of the Cleric is Judgement. Being able to do incredible magic burst damage on a hit scan ability that doesn't use up a spell slot and recharges is huge. Especially because it's hit scan, you're able to safely cast it over your allies' shoulders without wading in too closely. Though it does have a limited range, because of the Cleric's incredible will stat, it will almost one-shot squishy classes like rogues that have really low magic resist or fighters that are wearing a ton of plate. And one final strength of the Cleric is that they deal both magical and physical damage. This means they can target the weaknesses of any class in the game, and though they aren't really designed to be a damage-dealing class, they're more than capable of finishing off enemies in one-on-one fights. Next, we're going to talk about the Cleric's limitations. So first of all, Clerics are slow. They have slow interaction speed and they have slow movement speed, meaning that anybody that wants to run away from you will have a fairly easy time of doing that, and if you're trying to escape, almost any class can catch up to you. Next, for a limitation, Clerics have no ranged options outside of Judgement, which has an incredibly short range. So unless you're packing a bunch of explosive bottles or oil lanterns, you're going to have a tough time in a ranged engagement. The next limitation is Clerics don't really have a ton of options in terms of weapons to begin with. They have 2 one-handed maces with the Morning Star and the Flanged Mace, and they have the Maul or the Quarterstaff. And in terms of magical implements, you get the Spellbook or the Staff. And because the Staff doesn't offer any bonus spell power, it's not really a viable option unless you're doing an extreme budget run. So really you're looking at the Spellbook. And a final limitation of the Cleric is that the support spells in this game actually have a fairly high skill ceiling. Being able to quickly swap between spells and making sure that your spells are landing on target is actually pretty tricky, and I think that's part of the design for the Cleric. So whereas many games have support characters be more of an entry-level role where new players or more casual players can help support their friends, in Dark and Darker, Clerics actually are quite challenging because you have to aim and you have to be able to swap spells very quickly to be effective. So with the strengths and limitations out of the way, we're going to go over some general gameplay tips for being an effective Cleric. Tip 1. Try to bring a campfire into the dungeon to recover after a fight. But don't be afraid to ask your ranger buddy to place it down for you. Once again, your interaction speed is not very good, but still, having a campfire means you can almost double the effectiveness of your buffs because they come back very quickly. Do note, however, spells like Holy Light take a long time to recharge, so don't expect to get those back at the same rate. Number 2. Don't panic when getting focused. You aren't going to outrun anyone. Sometimes pulling up your shield and just holding block or going aggressive is the best way to survive. Rogues love to jump on clerics, but you can almost one-shot them with Judgement. So instead of trying to run away and letting them backstab you, face them head on and show them a little Mika Vista. Tip number 3. Don't be afraid to get in there for PvE. While the mace is slow, it hits very hard and has a very team-friendly animation. It attacks straight up and down, meaning you can go side by side with quite a few of the melee frontliners and you'll be able to safely clear with the best of them. Once again, you're not going to get a lot of XP as a cleric by sitting back and healing during PvE encounters. Nobody should really be taking damage, and if your friends are taking too much damage from the skeletons, tell them to bring some potions because your heals are there for PvP combat. Tip number 4. You aren't going to make a lot of money opening chests. Once again, slow interaction speed. So focus on smashing pots and scrounging up loose loot while your rogue or ranger buddy are dealing with the chests.
Running past that so I can get this guy.
And tip number 5. A good cleric knows when they need to sit back and heal their friends, and when it's best to push in. If you're fighting in a small cramped doorway, absolutely pull out that spellbook and keep your front line up. But if you're in a more open area, sometimes it's better to buff up and charge the enemy head on. So that's my basic overview of the cleric class, with their strengths, limitations, and a few general tips. I hope you like watching this video, and if you want to see more of this kind of content, like and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you think I left anything out, or if there's any other things you'd like me to go over in future class videos. Thanks for watching.